Okay, it's 9 o'clock. People are still joining, but as I said, we have not a heavy schedule maybe, but we have a lot to cover, I guess. Warm welcome everyone to this Learnifier webinar. My name is Ulrika Peyron, and I'm a marketing manager here at Learnifier. And we're really happy to see that so many of you have chosen to join us this morning and spend time with us. We have 45 minutes. Whoops, sorry. I'm so sorry. I have to go back to the first slide. Hold on, here we go. We have 45 minutes together. And Linnea Bywall, head of people at Alva Labs, will share her insights on how to drive change in learning initiatives. How do you actually get employees to apply what they've learned? And Linnea will walk you through an easy-to-apply scientific approach. So please ask your questions in the chat. We will address them at the end of the session. And what I also want to mention is that you will get the presentation afterwards. Many people, that is usually a question that pops up. Do we get the slides? Yes, you will get the slides. Before we begin, I want to give you a short introduction to Learnifier. We're the leading learning platform in the Nordics, and we're based in Sweden. But customers around the world use us to create learning experiences, training programs, and entire academies, primarily to onboard and develop the skills of their employees. We believe in making training easy, engaging, and efficient to achieve business outcomes. And this is what we're working on every day, both internally and together with our customers. And speaking of customers, we work with many of Sweden's strongest brands, some of which you see here on this slide. But now let me introduce you to today's speaker. Linnea Bywall, she's a licensed psychologist. I know that she's a former athlete as well, but she turned head of people at the Swedish assessment company Alva Labs. And Linnea, she's an appreciated influencer in the HR space, and her LinkedIn presence engages hundreds of followers every week. I'm actually one of the followers there. And she is frequently asked to speak on topics related to HR, recruitment, and leadership. So I'm really pleased to welcome you on the stage, or I'll hand over the microphone to you, Linnea. Warm welcome. We're proud to have you here, and please fire away.
Thank you, Ulrika. It's a pleasure joining. And I think this topic is one of my secret passions. That's not so secret, maybe. But I have a background working as a leadership developer, and then my biggest headache was to how do we translate learning into actions, into that concrete changes and concrete results. So that is what we will be focusing on today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen instead. Here we go. Right. So I want to cover the topic of how we can actually create change when it comes to learning. And I want to start with just I think still quite common example of what learning can look like. So let's say that a manager sends the full customer support team on a full day course in relationship building. They really want to be improve that skill because that is what they believe will increase the customer satisfaction in the engagement with customer and the support. They take in this external facilitator, there's lectures, there's discussions, there's networking, there's workshops. Everyone just comes back super engaged. They really love the training. They're really, really energized. And I think this would, come across as a success, right? We invested in our people. We want something to happen, and we really got what we paid for. The problem is after 6 weeks, the manager is really, really frustrated because there hasn't actually been any uptick in customer satisfaction scores, which was the whole kind of like idea of why they invested in this training. But how can that be? Because everyone was so happy with the training. Maybe some of you recognize yourself. Maybe you have been one of those participants and you were super pumped, but then you kind of went back to reality and, you know, continue doing what you usually do. And I think what we need to keep in mind here is that training or like learning is often created in a way where we don't take the human brain into account. Because we need to take a step back and just realize like we don't necessarily invest in learning just for the sake of learning, right? We want something to happen after that. I mean, in the HR community, we talk a lot about upskilling, reskilling. It's not just learning because it's cozy. It's because there's like a need to actually do something different, a need to adapt to a new role, a new reality, a new product, whatever it might be. But I think the problem that a lot of organizations stumble upon is that we underestimate how challenging it actually is to change our behavior. And we don't design learning in a way that actually fosters that change. Because like being a psychologist, I've always been really interested in like the human brain. And I think what we need to keep in mind here is, I mean, okay, now it's going to be weird to like raise your hand, all of those who have had a New Year's resolution. But I mean, okay, mentally raise your hand, all of those who have had a like New Year's resolution where you maybe wanted to exercise more or start, taking long walks or read or whatever you wanted to do. You wanted to change a habit. And I think often like the joke is that the gyms are packed in January and February, and then something happens, right? Despite people being super ambitious, wanting to change, it's really, really hard to actually get into that habit. Same thing at work. It's not that we can magically expect change to happen just because we send someone to a course. Because if we think about our habits as kind of mental highways, where like the brain is really used to behave in a certain way, that means it's very like automatic. It's easy. You don't have to like think about it. You just do it. You're driving on the like neural or neurological highway. You're just doing what you're usually doing. When we want to do something new, when we want to like create a new behavior, and it can be like, from my background, it was trying to get leaders to do something different, but it can be just as in this example we started with, getting the customer support team to build closer relationship with the customers. We need to act differently, right? And that change is kind of like a neurological tiny trail in the forest. Like it's bumpy, it's crooked, it's hard to take that route, especially if we compare it to the highway. The highway is easy, the highway is safe, the way I've always behaved, compared to doing something different. I have to take this little trail and it's ups and downs, and I might fall and I might need to like do it again, and I'm going to get really tired and I have to be really focused. But that is what learning should be about. It should be about like finding that trail and taking that trail over and over again, because eventually that little trail will turn into a street. It might never turn into a highway, but it will hopefully turn into a street that's going to be a lot easier to use. And I think these like traditional on-site external trainings, a full day or 3 full days, what that often does is that it opens the door to like, oh, look, here's a trail in the forest. You can take this route. But then we come home and we forget about that trail, because that type of training doesn't help us take the first steps. It doesn't help us practice walking on this little neurological trail. So what should we do instead? Well, I think we need to learn from the obvious source, Super Mario. And I would like to just, if you've ever played Super Mario, I want you to think about, how did you learn to play Super Mario? Was there an external facilitator? Was there a like long technical manual that you read as a child from page to page before you could start your Nintendo 64. Probably not the case, right? We learn to play Super Mario by doing and by learning from the consequences. So when we ran into one of those, flesh-eating plants that are in the pipes of Super Mario, we learned that like, oh, oops, if I touch this, I'm gonna die. Let's not do that again. If we ran into the mushrooms, we grew, right? Whoop. And we learned, aha, this is a good thing. And we want to continue to hunt for those mushrooms. But no one told us. We just learned from the consequences. And this is kind of like the whole concept that I really want to discuss today is this concept of consequences. Because when we think about like a behavioral change, we need to, in my mind, like back down to how does human behavior work? And there's this really, really easy model that explains that. It's called the ABC model. And A in this model stands for like the activator. Something happens before you do something. It can be my tummy growls that leads to the behavior of me walking over to the refrigerator and see if there's something yummy. It can be an instruction from my manager, you need to do this. It can be setting up a target. Something happens before that makes me do something. So the A activates the behavior. Then we have the B, the behavior, you're doing something. And then we have the C, the consequence, meaning what happens after the behavior. If my tummy growled, I went over to the refrigerator and I found, leftover birthday cake. Like, great consequence, right? The next time I'm hungry, I'm probably gonna like go to the refrigerator again. If my boss instructed me to do something, activated the behavior, I did the work task, comes back and get positive feedback, maybe even like high five from my team, we created some output, I had impact, I'm probably gonna do that behavior again. And what's like, all of this makes a lot of sense, but I think what's might come as a surprise, and this boils down to why Super Mario doesn't need an activator. It doesn't need the instructions, because 20% of what impacts the behavior comes from the A, the activator. But 80% of what drives the behavior comes from the consequence, meaning what happened after the behavior. And I think this is just like, in my mind, where we so often go wrong with learning. We focus all on the activation. We try to, we invest in someone learning something, and then we completely forget to follow up, to divide the learning into chunks so that you can actually do the behaviors needed, so you can see the consequences, get the positive feedback, see the outcome. So we focus way too much on the A and forget about the C. I think another just like great example here, I don't know how many of you works in an office where there's a note in the kitchen that says your mother doesn't work here. I think this is a classic example of an activator, right? It's meant to activate the behavior of putting away the coffee cups in the dishwasher. And now, looking at this, maybe you can understand why that note will probably not help. What will help is getting, if you hire someone to like do mental high fives and applaud people when they put away the coffee cups, I can guarantee that those coffee cups will never be in the sink. They will always be in the dishwasher. So there is something around like we need to rethink how we do this. Same thing if we go back to the New Year's resolution. We set up the target. I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. We buy the gym card, we're there, we're super pumped in January and February. But if we don't see the progress, if the working out in itself isn't rewarding, if we don't like make sure that it feels good, then we won't continue to do it. So it's great to have a New Year's resolution, but you need to make sure that you actively have positive consequences. And so far, hopefully this all makes sense. But I also want to highlight a little bit of what does like the consequences look like. I think we need to divide them into both like short-term and long-term consequences. So what happens immediately after a behavior? I mean, that's the short term. That can be in the meeting, I present something and people go like, wow, really good work, Linnea, thank you. That's a positive short-term consequence. Or I present something in a meeting, and when I'm done, there's like dead silence. No one says everything. Everyone's like grumpy faces. And that's a negative short-term consequence. Then we have the long-term consequences. It can be, again, if we take this New Year's resolution example, the positive outcome is obviously that I will be healthier, I will feel better, like because the workout is really good for me. The negative long-term effects are very, very few when it comes to working out. But the short-term consequences of like, I'm on my couch with my Netflix account, it's raining outside, the negative short-term consequences of getting my ass off the couch and going to the gym are so large that it's really hard to remember those positive long-term effects. Because another thing we need to keep in mind about the human brain is that it rewards the immediate, it rewards the short-term consequences. That's why it's so hard to get off that couch, even though we know that in the long run it will be good for us. The brain works in a way where we're so much more control of what happens immediately after the behavior. So if we then take this into the realm of learning, say that we want our team to, again, be better relationship builders in the customer support team, and we want them to practice this new skill. What we need to keep in mind here, if they don't change their behavior, what will happen then? Well, short term, they can continue riding on this highway, right? This neurological highway. That feels comfortable. That's easy. I know how to do this. But long term, this will lead to maybe lower performance. Maybe we won't have those satisfied customers within our customer support. But what if we then try to get them to change the behavior? Well, changing the behavior, in the short term, might be painful. I remember I have to run on this little trail in the forest and not take the highway. And maybe when I'm, taking those first steps, I might not be used to doing that. Maybe I will get that frowning face on the Zoom call, or the customer on the other end of the phone will not react in the way that I hope them to. But over time, if I continue to take that trail, it will turn into a street and I will improve over time. But this is why it's so important that learning in itself, we need to almost artificially create the positive short-term effects. So I'm soon going to go into talking a little bit about how we do learning at Alva Labs, but just some ideas of how learning should be designed to help to kind of game the human brain. The first one is we need shorter learning sessions. Having these full day sessions, it can be engaging for sure, but very, very often we tend to, forget pretty much all of the content that we've learned. Dividing it into chunks will make it a lot easier for our brain to keep the attention, but also for us to try the behaviors in between those sessions. And that moves us to the second point. It needs to be spread out over time. Efficient learning that actually drives a change will be a lot more impactful if we don't just do it once. We need to spread out the content we have or the learning opportunities we have over time. Simply because we want to continue to activate those behaviors for sure, but also because we want to have space in between so that people can run on that trail so that we can follow up on that progress. Ideally, we have like a more interactive and practical learning. Why? Because again, like we don't just want the activation aspect to happen. We want the behavioral aspect to happen. Like if we can design learning in a way where you try out the trail already in the learning session in a safe space that's less scary, where we can create those positive incentives and positive feedback for trying, it's going to like set the learners up for success to actually dare to try that on their own. So a lot more practical. The fourth aspect, I think it's super important, is where we need to have assignments to try things like in the wild. We need to take learning from like the classroom, even if that's like digital or in person or whatever it is, what type of classroom we create. We need to take the learning from that learning opportunity into the reality. Because that it often sounds very easy in theory, it makes so much sense. I found this trail and I'm going to run on it, and I can see that how this will actually create like a positive impact and a positive change and result. But then there's the reality, and the reality tends to hit us like a whirlwind. It's so much other aspects going on, and it's not just an activator, a behavior, and a consequence. It's way more complex. But that's also why we need to do these assignments in the wild to actually practice the behaviors that we want to see over time. It doesn't take just running on that trail once. You have to run over and over and over again. The fifth aspect I want to highlight here is joint reflection. I think we have so much to gain from just reflecting over what happened. How was this helpful? Why was this hard? What did I like? What can I take with me? That's a version to design a consequence within a learning experience. It can be just like we learn something, but then we also reflect on how can I use this? How can you use this? What does this mean in my reality? Because very, very often we need to adapt things to our own traits, characteristics, like context. Again, like we all have these like mental highways, but they're different based on who we are. And we all might need to find that trail, but sometimes we need to find a trail that's a little closer to the highway, if that makes sense. Like how can I leverage my own strength, and finding that in like a reflection is a very, very like powerful way to do it. And then the final and sixth point here is that a learning opportunity or learning initiative that drives change needs to have some sort of like follow up on the progress. Like I cannot stress that enough of how like important that aspect is. If you only do like one thing with learning, it is to follow up on how people are doing. It's so important that I made it bold, so you have to remember it. But I really think that this is the key to be successful. And this is how we go from, oh, learning, this is cozy and great, to, wow, learning is a game changer for this organization. And just before I go into talking a little bit how we are doing this, I just want to kind of like, if we zoom out, we are in like an environment where change is happening so fast. Like so many roles have already changed so much. So many roles will be something completely different in just like a year from now, due to like the revolution of AI and like all the stuff that's happening in the world. Like there are very, very few organizations, roles that will not face this reality up. If we don't change, we will be in serious problems. So investing in this is going to be, that's going to make or break an organization. Okay, long rant. Hopefully it all made sense, but I want to be a little bit more practical. So as I said, or as Ulrika said, I am the head of people at Alva Labs. And learning is one of my passions. So when I kind of like designed our learning initiatives, I try to keep these aspects in mind. So I would like to take an example. This is what our leadership program looks like at Alva. We've been running this for like 4 different rounds. And the way that it's designed is that it consists of 6 different workshops. Each workshop is 1 hour and 45 minutes. And as you can see, like in between all of these workshops, you have individual assignments. Why? Because you need to practice what you've learned. We also have collegial coaching throughout the program, meaning like I pair up people across the organization, ideally people that don't necessarily work that much together, so that they can act as that like reflection buddy. We call them Leader Lab buddies. So they meet up and discuss the topics that we've covered, or just, you know, the aspects of their reality that they want to discuss. There's also, between the first and the second workshop, I do an individual coaching session with each participant, simply to find that, like, what are their mental highways? How can we make sure that they drive on the highways as often as possible? But also, how can we find, like, where do you need to take another route? And where do you actually need to find that trail based on who they are, what their like ambition level is, what their developmental areas are. And I can just, one thing that I try to highlight as much as possible in that individual coaching is that it's a lot more efficient to build on strengths rather than just focus on the developmental areas. Simply because, again, like if we can use the highways as often as possible, where we can just be ourselves, what we're really good at, and then use the mental energy to where we really need to change, it's going to be a lot easier. So doing one thing at a time. So this is an overview of the full program, but I want to also like zoom in on a workshop, what that looks like. So each workshop, these like 1 and 45, has this is the like generic agenda. So if we look at the left side of the slide, we always start with like setting the purpose of why is it that we're talking about this, a really short theoretical like snippet, meaning like I talk a little bit about like how this works, but then we go into practice, which is pretty much like an hour out of the 1 hour and 45 minutes. And then we end up with like some adaptation. This is called the format model of learning. It's a really good like way to practice blended learning, where you get a little bit of theory, a lot of practice, but also some adaptation. So the generic agenda to the right is we always start with a check-in, simply because like, what is it that you joined this meeting with? It can be, I'm super stressed, or it can be like, I'm super pumped, but trying to help, like get the group to help each participant and like, okay, how can we, you're super stressed. Is there anything we can do so that you can be focused in here and now? Then we have a follow-up. And this is where we follow up on the assignments that they've had on like since the last workshop. We spend a good like 25 minutes maybe on this follow-up. Again, why? Because it creates a consequence. If they had an assignment of practicing feedback in a certain way during their one-on-ones, I let them record their one-on-ones, and then we talk about what did they see? What worked well? What will you take with you? But it's also brilliant of someone, because there's always someone that hasn't done the assignment. But then that's also a consequence, right? Okay, you have to stand in front of the full group and say that you didn't practice. You did not run the little trail in the forest. Why? And like curiously explore that. Then we have, as I said, like this format model of when we cover the new topic. So we talk about like, why is it relevant to talk about feedback, for instance? We talk about how feedback is done in or given in the best possible way. We have practical assignment where they divide into groups and try to give each other feedback. And then we come back and reflect, how was that? And then we end that with like adopting this to me, like, okay, what did you learn? How will you use that? In what sessions? And the reason for that is really to try to take it down from, oh, this was hard, to, okay, I can start in this tiny little context and start practicing there. And then we have the set the assignment for next time. So there's always an assignment that they need to practice what we have just learned and practiced together. They need to go out and do that in the wild. And we have like workbooks where they can note down their progress. I try to, the best thing with the pandemic is that it's so convenient to record yourself because you're always in digital meetings. And video recordings where you see yourself practicing leadership or whatever like behavior you want to do, so good. It's painful to watch yourself, but it's so good. And then we end the session with a checkout. So what do you leave this session with? How do you feel now compared to when we started? So this is what like an example of how I've tried to take these like principles of ABC and turn that into a learning experience that can hopefully drive actual behavioral change. Okay, that was all the slides I wanted to cover, but I'm very happy to ask or answer any questions you might have, of course.
Yes, and we do have a few questions in the chat. I just got to say thank you first of all. I think it's really interesting to hear how you do it at Alva Labs, especially. That's what I will take with me. The way, especially since we are working at Learnifier right now, we're running a trust analysis in the leadership team to see. I mean, all employees have had the chance to sort of evaluate their leaders. And then we discuss that from a head and heart perspective, you know, and I think it's sort of connected to what you talk about a bit. But and then I really like the metaphor of the highway and then taking small trails, and you need to go off the highway to that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
But yeah, and another just that I want to mention is that we have a really dedicated service team at Learnifier, and they do this. They help our customers drive this kind of change in the small and in the big parts as well of their organizations. So if you're a customer and you don't know about this, please let us know what is your highway and which trails do you want to take, and we can help you out. Okay, let's see with the questions. We have almost, we have 13 minutes, so we'll see. Robin asks, interesting, do you do this for all of your employees? How many employees are you?
So the example with the leader lab, as we call it, that is for managers or like leaders in the organization. You don't have to have a managerial position. So that is not for all employees. The learning initiatives we do for all employees, and when we do like lunch and learns, we do a lot of like psychological safety workshop. I try to use the same format in the like sense of the workshop itself is always super practical. We do very little just theory stuff. We do it a lot more like practical and interactive. And even when we've done like the learning for like the full organization, we also try to like follow up on things. I've joined like team meetings to follow up on like, okay, the behaviors that you wanted to do, how did that go, to help the organization just like create those consequences. And we're 65 employees today.
Thanks. And then Emma asked, what was the learning model called that you apply on the workshop?
Format, like a for and then MAT, format model for learning. It's Googleable, but very, very usable. And like there's probably a million others that tells the kind of same story. But I think it's a good way to think about like designing a workshop, for instance.
Yeah, really nice. Thanks. And then Per had a comment. He says, I like the adapting to me part, as we are all different. And I assume that Per refers to, working with your strengths instead of working against your strengths.
Yeah, and also that's also part of this like format model where
like
why should I learn about feedback? how does feedback work? Let's practice it, but then also like adapting it to how can I use this feedback model? And I think it can be as concrete as like, oh, I need to do this more in my one-on-ones with Camilla, because I need to give her more feedback, and I'm going to start there. I think the best way to actually drive behaviors is really to set a clear target, activate the behavior, let the people like do it, but also in a way where they feel that they can like take on that that task, so that it should be challenging but not too challenging, because if it's too challenging, I'm going back to this the example of the New Year's resolution, working out 3 times a week at the gym. Very often we set the bar too high, meaning we're going to fail, and then that's going to be a negative consequence. It's a lot more powerful if we can set the target and the expectation on the behavior as like just a really simple first step. It's going to be a lot more a positive experience if we actually are successful. So in the gym example, instead of like, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, maybe I'm going to go for a walk for 15 minutes twice a week. Like that feels easy. I can do that. I walk to the subway or whatever, like making it so that you know that this is not too much of a stretch, so that you can feel like, I did it. And now I can take the next step. I'm going to take a walk for 25 minutes twice a week, and like get you like up there. And I think that's also kind of the idea with this like adaptation aspect of learning, where everyone will have different starting points. Some people are fantastic at giving feedback. That's already a highway. Great. How can they adapt this so that they can do it even more? Maybe teach others, be a role model for this. Their like adaptation will look in one way, where someone's like, this is my hardest part. This is for sure like a trail. It's not even a trail. There's like bushes in the way. I have to cut through them. Then the first step and the adaptation should be really, really simple, of like, okay, where are you more comfortable to give feedback? Well, it's to this person because we know each other well. Great. Try to give that person feedback moving forward as a first step.
Great. Okay, then I'm going to continue with the questions.
Go ahead.
They keep coming in as well. So Vendel asks, do you typically run these workshops face-to-face or digital? What do you prefer give best result in your opinion?
$1 million question. We do hybrid. We have some employees that are fully remote, and we have some employees that are sometimes in the office, sometimes not. So to kind of cater to the full organization, we tend to do them hybrid. That means, in our world at least, that everyone joins a Zoom link. The people that are in the room, we share sound, so we have a speaker, but everyone logs in so that everyone has their camera on, because that makes it less weird for the person who's remote. And then we try to, when we divide into breakout rooms, I tend to, like, the people that are in the office, they are one group. The people that are remote, they are one group over Zoom. So that's like, we tend to do it hybrid. And then what I prefer, I think it depends. I think there's pros and cons. A mix is probably a good thing, simply because some people will prefer one thing, some people will prefer another thing. So if we can help as many as possible to get something, it's probably easy. So I think it just like boils down to how you're working in general in your organization. And I wouldn't change learning. If you are hybrid, then you do hybrid learning. If you are on-site, you do on-site learning. If you are remote, you do remote learning, because that's what people will be used to. So I think we all works. We just need to adapt accordingly.
Cool. Then Jens asks if you could quickly list the assignments that you do.
Oh, yes. I think it's probably easiest if we look at this one. So now I'm going to see if I remember all of them. Okay, when we talk about purpose, we talk about ikigai, the Japanese concept of what does the world need? What am I good at? You can Google it. It's fantastic. But then we do a small exercise, which is there's a speech on your 90th birthday. What is it that they're saying about you? And you get to list that. And then the second part is how are you living your life so that will be true? And then there's also another exercise in that purpose workshop where you sit 2 and 2 and you list like, I'm really, really good at this. I love doing this. And this is what I feel like the world needs. Sometimes we link it to like full life, or sometimes we link it to just at Alva. What are you good at Alva? Like, what do you love doing in your work? And what do you think like Alva really needs? And then based on those 3 aspects, like help each other form like a sentence of like, this is my purpose, either then life purpose or work purpose. When we do coaching employees, we use the GROW model, also super Googleable and very well used. And then what we do is for the exercise, we divide in pairs and people bring an actual problem that they have, and they tell about the problem, and the counterpart sits with the GROW model and asks questions related to like, what's the goal, what's the reality, what's the objective, and there are ready questions that you can use as examples, and they help the person solve that problem. I think that is one of like the best exercises. And then for like, if we take some examples for assignments that you do at home, when we do like leadership one-on-one, we go over the like full range leadership model. And then there's like 6 different dimensions of successful leadership, and they get to pick one of those dimensions, and they have to use one of them to like in a team meeting. So one of them is like promoting group goals. So if you pick that, you have to discuss the topic in a way that you promote like the group goal of the team. Another one is provide like intellectual stimulation. So if you pick that one, you have to like provide intellectual stimulation in the team meeting. So you have to practice those behaviors. When we have feedback, the take-home assignment is in the workbook. There's a long list of like it says feedback, and there's a little checkbox, and we have a competition of who can give the most feedback over the course of 2 weeks until we gather again. So that's some examples, but reach out to me if you want more. I'm happy to share.
That's what I was going to say, because I don't think we will have time to answer all the questions that are coming in, actually. We have a few more minutes. Maybe you can leave your contact details. I don't know if you have them in your presentation, but otherwise we will provide them in the follow-up emails for sure. Let me see if there's another question that we can maybe a last question would be, Martina, how do you do to create a trusting environment to encourage to go out in the wild?
Great question. I think there's a lot of tricks you can use here. I think one is like practice together where it's safer, but also acting as a role model, trying it yourself first. Every time we do like psychological safety workshop, I always on stage do the assignment that I want everyone else to do, just to like show that I can do it, I trust the team, and now I've gone first. That's gonna set the scene for others to dare to do it. Help with group sizes, but also help with this adaptation. What is a step that's comfortable enough, challenging enough, like finding that balance, I think is also key. But lead by example is probably the most powerful one.
Great. Yeah, we're 1 minute ahead, but I think there are a few more questions. I will pass them over to you, Linnea, as well. Maybe you can answer them afterwards. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. It was great. I think we could have stayed here for another hour or so discussing all these interesting aspects of learning and the way you do it at Alva Labs. Yeah, I mean, I just want to share the last slide that we usually do. And that is, we want to send you off with the words, may the learning be with you. So, and I hope you check in here again soon. We will run more webinars and you will receive the presentation and the recording afterwards, as per usual. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in today. And thank you, Linnea.
No, thank you. Super fun. Have a nice Wednesday, everyone.
Bye.